So in this video, I'm going to give you 7 tips to get amazing autumn photos.
I'm hearing your voice in my dreams. I wanna escape you. I really think I made a big mistake. I want you to know I can't stand the thought of losing you. Tell me, do you think of me too?
Morning everybody, fantastic to see you all again. Well, we're in autumn. What an amazing time of the year. It's definitely my favourite time of the year for photography. It's just, there's something super special about it. Those crisp mornings, you know, you get foggy mornings, you get those amazing sort of golden colours on the leaves. And yeah, there's just something super special, and it means that you don't have to get up at 3 AM to get a sunrise, which is probably the best part. Anyway, I was in the Lake District recently trying to get some of the early colours just as they start to turn. I find that probably from the second week in September, the third week in September probably, the silver birches start to turn, and from then onwards you've got to really be paying attention to the change in colours. But more about my trip to the Lake District in next week's video. So let's get straight into the first tip, and that is composition and colour. So colour plays a really big part in composition in all photos, but especially in autumn, and you can often take this for granted. Obviously we've got shots like this where you've got the amazing autumn colours, maybe a bit of fog, and those beautiful sort of auburn colours, those yellows, those rich oranges. And those rich autumn colours work well together because if you look at the colour wheel, they're analogous to each other, they're next to each other on the colour wheel, and that works well together. So anything where you've just got colours like that together are going to work well and create something that's a really sort of warm feeling photo. But you can do all the things with autumn colours as well, and one of the things that I like to do is combine those sort of autumn colours with something that's opposite on the colour wheel. So for instance, maybe taking the oranges and trying to find some blue colours, like this shot here that I shot a few years ago now in the River Brathay in the Lake District, and we've got these cool sort of more greeny blue colours at the bottom and then the orange colours at the top. Now it's fairly subtle, but those are opposite on the colour wheel and they work very well together. They're very complementary. And it's worth thinking about that. Here's another example from the Isle of Skye. So there's no trees involved in this. This is just the bracken that's died, and I'll talk more about how you can use that later in one of the other tips. But we've got this bracken that's very orange, and it's also being lit by a low sun, so it's creating an even more orange look. And then we've got the blue that's reflected from the blue sky down into the cloud, and also probably from the sea colour as well back into the blue cloud. And those two colours, that blue and that orange, are opposite on the colour wheel, and so they're very complementary. So it's a good idea to have a look at a colour wheel and try and find out a little bit more about colour science, because that plays a big part in photography, and getting the right colours can have a really big impact. And also don't forget that you can give your colours a little bit of a helping hand by using the hue slider on the HSL tool in Lightroom. You don't have to do it a lot, but maybe you just want to tweak those oranges or tweak those blues, and it can just help to get exactly opposite on the colour wheel, which can create a much stronger image. Sometimes nature just needs that little helping hand just to work well. Okay, on to the second tip, and that is using greys and sort of any sort of negative space as well within an image, because what you'll find within an autumn image is there's quite a lot going on, and what you want to try and do is try and create some sort of contrast. And you can do that by using tree trunks or rocks or just negative space, sort of space that's not got a lot going on, just to give your eye a rest in the image. So take for example this shot here. This is a shot that there's quite a lot of negative space around it, and that space tends to be quite cool as well, which is another point. Cool colours tend to drop back in an image, and warm colours tend to come forward in an image. In fact, this image I've also got in my calendar, quick plug. There's still a few left, but this image here, you know, you can see that we've got the warm colours here of the leaves. We've got the silver birch silver, sort of grey silver tones on the actual trunk here, and then we've got the dark sort of bluey green colours where this is in shade in the back, and this helps to create a sort of extra dimension to your images by using those cooler colours along with the warm colours. Trunks and contrasts are something that I think are really important, which is why I like silver birch trees so much. They've got to be the best tree for photographers, silver birches. What does everyone think? What's your favourite tree? Maybe in the comments below, post what you think. Definitely for me it's silver birch. But you can see here I've got a scene with just some oaks, etc., which is a nice scene, but there's not a lot of contrast going on. But soon as I actually just turned 90 degrees to that exact scene, I've got some silver birches in there. It creates more dimension to the shot. You start to get more interest in the image, and that contrast of that grey tones of the silver birch trunk against the beautiful colours of autumn really creates something very, very special. In fact, talking about that trip in the Lake District I've just come back from, I was there when we had a little bit of mist, and I managed to get this shot, which is just, you can just see the leaves are just starting to turn of the silver birch. But this shot, without those trunks of the silver birch, would have been nothing really. But I've got this rock and those silver birch, those greys go so well with the greens and yellows within this image. So on to point number 3, and that is autumn isn't all about trees. And just to talk a little bit about that, let me jump into the field. So this is me in next week's video, just jumping back to this video in the 7 tips, just to talk about that you don't have to shoot just trees when you think about autumn photography. So if you look behind me now, the fells are a brown colour, all the brackens turn brown, and it creates this amazing sort of rich brown burnt colour, and it just looks amazing, especially when you get mist like this super autumn morning. And I was sharing my trip to the Lake District and showing you some of the shots I got on this amazing morning next Sunday, so don't forget to tune in. Okay, back to me in the studio for the 7 tips. So yeah, as I just said, autumn isn't just about trees. Obviously, we all like to take the trees as the foliage changes colour, of those maples, those silver birches and those beech trees, but it isn't all about that. And I quite often like to look for landscapes where, you know, other things have changed colour in the landscape. One being the bracken. I think the bracken in the UK is something that just looks fantastic in the autumn. Here's an example of a shot that I took really close to where I live. Actually, you can see it's very flat there. I live in the Cheshire Plain, which is that flat area where it's frosty in the distance. But by combining the contrast of the sunlight on the bracken and this really strong diagonal against that sort of flat, cool area in the background, then it creates quite a dramatic shot. So using autumn in the landscape, other than just using trees, is a good idea. Again, this is a good example in the Lake District. I've shown this shot before, but it's just creating those warm colours, using those warm colours to show something that's a little bit different at this time of year. Even in the Faroe Islands, where there are no trees because it's just too windy, the grass changes and it gets a little bit more auburn colour, and you get some fantastic shots. These are probably closer to the beginning of November, right at the end of autumn, but you know, this same shot in the summer, these would be really rich greens, but by shooting it in the autumn, I've created a very different feel to the shots. On to point number 4, and that is, don't forget about the smaller things in the landscape. I feel that in autumn, more than any other seasons, it's important to look for details, because often there's some amazing shots in those details. Maybe it's just a leaf on the floor, maybe it's just had the lights just shining through a particular leaf, or you know, maybe it's just one part of the landscape that's just catching the light, you know, differently. Like this shot here of some lilies on the River Brathay. You can see that these lilies have just started to change colour. We've got a yellow one and a green one, but they make this shot. So, you know, by looking down and just trying to find something that might signify autumn a little bit, might just tell a story a little bit, is a really good idea. Maybe there's just some trees that have changed colour in parts, whereas the other parts haven't, like this shot I took of through, actually I think there's a little bit of sunlight backlighting these leaves, but I took through the leaves here, and I've got this green and this orange which look really nice together. Or I recently, actually I bumped into Verity when I was in the Lake District last week, but she's a fantastic photographer from the UK. And I noticed on Instagram, she posted a photo where she said, look down, you'd be amazed what you'd see. And she just shot this leaf with a little bit of water on it, on this sort of darker pebbles, and it looked amazing. So just try that. Just look for those things that you might not often shoot, because I think in autumn you'll find some amazing ones. Even cobwebs, for instance. I shot a cobweb the other day which just looked fantastic. Okay, on to point number 5, and that is to know how to use the light within your scene. I've done lots of different videos on this. I'll link one of them here about light and light in photography, which is so important to understand light. But it's amazing how light and different times of the day can make such a big difference, especially to woodland scenes. So these are 2 shots taken actually exactly the same time of day. One was a little bit of sun was coming through, and the other was it was overcast with a tiny bit of mist. But just look at the difference. This was taken on my phone. I've not done anything to the images, but you can see that there's a very different feel to these shots. And taking the same scene in different lights, different times of the day, different weather conditions will produce such different shots, and you shouldn't underestimate that, and it really does make a difference. Now, I prefer a little bit of fog in my woodland, but that doesn't mean that you have to have fog. Maybe that you want to take it on a rainy day, and what you'll find is if you do shoot autumn scenes, after the rain's just fallen, then the leaves get very saturated, the colours get very saturated. And if you use a polarizer as well, then it really saturates those colours and can produce some amazing images like this one here. You know, that you can see the rain's just gone through, and it was really saturated colours. Now, it's probably not the best composition, this, if I'm honest. This is probably a good example of where I got a little bit carried away with autumn and didn't think too much about the composition, but you can see just how vivid those colours are. I haven't done much to this image. I've not processed it very much at all. So using a polarizer can take that as well to the next step. Okay, if you got this far, then thanks ever so much for watching the video. I'd massively appreciate it if you've enjoyed the video to give it a like. I've got a couple more tips to come, but if you can give it a like, then that would be fantastic. And if you're not subscribed, believe it or not, 50% of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed. So if you're not subscribed, please consider it. I produce videos every week. You know, sometimes I'll chuck another video in as well, you never know. And it massively helps me if you subscribe. So the link's just below me here, and I'd massively appreciate any subscriptions. Okay, on to point 6, and that is timing is crucial in autumn. And you'll be amazed just how important timing is. You know, you could go like literally 2 days later and the colours will have changed, the leaves might have dropped off, there might have been a heavy wind. So it's really important to have a local wood that you can go back to again and again and again. And it's not just timing from a point of view of when the colours are working, but also the light can change as well. I found a place on Homefell in the Lake District where these 3 trees just got backlit, and I was going to go back and take this shot again because I just wasn't quite happy with the composition, and I just didn't get the same conditions. It was about 2.5 weeks later I thought I would, but the sun had moved far enough that it got blocked out and one of the trees just wasn't being illuminated. So thinking about how the light's changing, how the colours are changing is really, really important in autumn, and just trying to time it right. Now obviously you want to get those weather conditions, but it's amazing how much 2 or 3 days can make to those leaf colours, maybe the bracken colours. So don't think you've seen something and you're going to go back in a week's time, because it will have changed so much. Okay, on to point 7, and I feel that point 7 is probably the most important of any of these tips, and that is that autumn, more than any other time, is when you need to spend more time trying to find a composition. It seems as though in autumn photography is easy. Everything looks amazing, everything looks pretty. The views, whenever you go out, your senses are just getting bombarded by colours, by sounds, by smells, by the change in temperature, and all those things contribute to create this amazing thing in your mind. But when you take a photo, it's 2D, it hasn't got any of those other things, and you can often get back to Lightroom and be more disappointed than any other time of the year. Certainly that is my experience. I find that all the time. I go out there, I think this looks amazing, and then I get back into Lightroom and I think, oh, That's just not as how I thought it was going to be. So you've got to really try hard to find those compositions, and don't just think a good view is a good image. So just spend a little bit more time with your phone, just with your eyes, wandering around and trying to find something, because I guarantee that you'll definitely find that that's better when you get back to Lightroom and look at your photos. And the other thing is, don't get a bit snap happy. Don't think that looks good, that looks good, that looks good. Just slow down a little bit. Take your time, have an apple. I guarantee that'll improve your autumn photos. Okay, I hope these have been useful. I hope you found these 7 tips useful. I think I'm really looking forward to getting out and shooting this autumn. What a strange year we've had. Let's hope we can get some amazing autumn shots. Share them on Instagram. Make sure you use the hashtag 2020ND. I look at those all the time and comment on them. And I will use them at some point in a video going forward. Next week I'm going to show you my video from the Lake District, and the week after that I'll get back to Harris. Thanks ever so much for watching. Until next Sunday. Bye.
My heart, you're still here.